My name is Dylan, a student reporter with Invention Convention Worldwide. I'm excited to introduce my guest, Tarun, a 10th grader from Ohio. Tarun's most recent invention, Trident, won the Community and Societal Benefit Award at the Invention Convention U.S. Nationals 2023 competition. Welcome, Tarun.
Thanks for having me. Hello.
So, Tarun, before we get into more details about your project, tell us a little bit about yourself. What are some hobbies you have, hidden talents, or unique experiences?
My name is Tarun. I'm a 10th grader at Olentangy Liberty High School in Ohio. And I've been doing Invention Convention for like a decade now, so it's been almost 10 years. I really love like the inventing process itself, and that's probably what like brought me into it. And I guess like some hidden talents are I'm a pretty good debater, I would say. Uh, I mean, like I do stuff like beyond just inventing in Invention Convention. I love to do science fair. I love to get like hands on with the wet lab stuff, and I just really love like the experimental STEM design and like STEM ideas that Invention Convention fosters.
So, you mentioned you've been doing Invention Convention for around 10 years. How did you first get into inventing?
Yeah, how I first got into inventing wasn't like I actually thought I wanted to invent something and then like I found a competition. It's more like my neighbor or the person who lived in the apartment below me competed, or her daughter competed in an invention convention competition before when she was a little bit younger, and then we basically got referred. And then I did my first invention convention project, and I prepared it the night before, so it wasn't very great. But I did the competition and I ended up losing, and I lost pretty badly. But my mom figured that since I cared enough to cry when I lost, I probably loved the invention process enough, or like I fell in love with it. And then I've been doing invention convention since then, like on and off, in terms of like how deep and how committed I've been to it. But these last couple of years have been like my greatest experiences with invention convention.
That's really cool. So, do you mind telling us about your project and the problem it addresses?
Sure. So the most recent project that I had is Trident, and what Trident does is it turns plastics into fuel, such as diesel and gasoline, through a process called pyrolysis. And pyrolysis has been like around for more than 1,000 years, but my project specifically makes this like process easier and allows it to be marketed to indigenous communities or developing countries where there's a concentration of plastic waste.
This seems like a really complicated project. So, who is your main audience and how are you trying to gear this towards them?
Yeah, so my main audience was like multifaceted. The first one was like consumers, right? Just like not normal consumers, people like me and you. And the reason why I tailored it towards people like me and you is because Trident is actually like a profitable device because it yields like such a high concentration of gasoline, diesel from rubbers and plastics. It is profitable in the course of 2 to 3 years. And then the second audience that I wanted to tailor like my invention to was like communities or in like developing countries who have like a high content of plastic waste that happens in coastal areas, and knew that because these people had a high percentage of waste and pollution, which essentially caused disease and caused like a bunch of negative impacts. It's really cool to market a device that is most applicable to them, and it's also not incredibly expensive, like we see like the machines in the status quo, which are made to be like lab grade or something like that.
I know inventing can be a long process, so when did you start this process and how many iterations or versions of this final product did you make?
Yeah, so I probably started this project the like before I finished the project I did last year or the time before. So I think in total it's probably been like 2.5 years. I probably had like four main iterations, and my projects, at least like the way I view them, like usually is through a huge environmental lens. And I think that's what Invention Convention wants us to do, like try to take on and tackle the world's largest problems. So I usually start super large and I try to scale down my goals to something specific. And so the first thing I want to do is fix plastic pollution. And I know there's like a bunch of ways to do that, but I thought it's really hard to fix something like plastic pollution at the source, especially with how complex of a problem it is. And for me, I wanted to make plastic pollution something good or something profitable for individuals, especially where it's in its highest concentration. So in like developing countries or coastline countries.
Among those iterations, what are some of the largest challenges you had to overcome?
Yeah, so I think the largest challenge in parts of the iterations for me is I want to make my device like novel and actually like innovative, right? I didn't want to just improve on something that's been done before. I wanted to actually innovate upon it. And so the hardest thing for me was actually integrating something what I called cold plasma methodology, which is using cold plasma in plastic pyrolysis, which has really never been done before. And that's the hardest thing for me because there's no research for me to look back on. It was all kind of like impromptu, and then apart from that, also making and designing my device to be as compact as it is is super difficult because the whole innovativeness of the device relies on how compact it is and how like applicable it is in places where there's not a lot of space, right? So like our backyards or in a community, in like an indigenous community or like a developing country. So I think that'd probably be the hardest challenge for me across the iterations.
Are there any of these challenges that you're still facing with your project that you're working to solve?
Yeah, so like the largest thing I'm still working on is obviously like patenting my research. Not necessarily like my device itself, but my cold plasma research. I think that's the hugest innovative factor that I had in my project, and I think that like the hugest thing with that is it like entirely revolutionizes pyrolysis, which is a concept which has been like there for 1,200 years, but it completely revolutionizes this concept. And I think that's what I want to like push out to the world, even if it isn't me like directly implementing the project or implementing the research. I think the research is super cool. I'm trying to push it out there to the world.
Nice. So, throughout this project, what was your favorite part?
I think there's a lot of favorite parts. I think for me, usually the most favorite part is competing at Invention Convention Nationals. Um, but like also, I guess it's like a lot of stress and it's a lot of preparation going into Invention Convention Nationals. I think this time and this invention around the time I had the most amount of happiness, or like I was super happy, was when I won the number one award in Invention Convention Americas. And to me, that's always been like a milestone in my previous inventions. Like 2 years ago, I competed like also in the Invention Convention Globals, and I didn't really feel like that went really well. And this time, I was like, oh, second and third spots have been called. It's kind of like a reach to get the first place. And then when they called my name, I was like super duper happy, and like everything has paid off.
I saw that you are currently patent pending, so do you have any guidance that you would give other people that are looking to pursue a patent?
Yeah, so I think where there's like an innovative approach, whether that's really small or like super large like mine, I think there's always something you can like actually patent and have your research like safeguarded through like actual I guess like through the actual like policies that are made for patent rights. I think that's super cool because that gives you like the rights to your own research, and that essentially like publishes to the world and establishes that what like solution you came up for a certain problem, whether how large or small it is, belongs to you, and you actually like found the solution to that problem. And I don't think like the solution has to be super innovative. I don't think the USPTO is like, unless you have a super innovative patent you can't patent. I think any innovation that you develop to any problem, whether it's small or large, that should be patented and can be patented. I think that's super cool experience.
What is something that you want to do next, whether that involves this project or a different project that you may be working on?
Yeah, so I think the steps for me right now are working on the project and bring me to U.S. nationals next year. I think that's arguably like the largest problem I've worked on in the last couple of years. And what that basically does, it's a model to essentially it's an algorithm to model international migration, which means that like we see humanitarian like refugees and immigrants coming into countries like the United States, but all of them aren't accepted and or like aren't granted refugee. My project and my model essentially like characterizes how many immigrants can we actually accept in countries that are not oppressive like the United States, that are supposed to be like international guarantees of security and freedom, like the American dream, right? So my project essentially models how many immigrants can we accept and how many immigrants can we have. So just modeling international migration, which I think is arguably the hardest problem and largest problem in the world right now.
That seems really interesting. What advice do you have for other inventors that may be hesitant about pursuing a project like this?
Yeah, I think the issue that most people always have is like they second doubt themselves on how innovative or how cool or how strong their invention is. I think looking past that is probably like the biggest. It's like the biggest accomplishment, and that's like the first step to success. Before I invented on my project that I took to nationals for the first time, my idea before that was like super simple. It was a way to get grass into lawn bags without like difficulty, right? It's super easy way to get grass into lawn bags. And then I'd realized that there's something already for that, which is called a shoe. Uh, and then that essentially inspired me after, because I knew that like what I wanted to innovate on has already been implemented or has already been produced. I wanted to now reach out to something that's like super large, like a super huge problem. And for me, that was the pollution caused by smokestacks. So I think starting to invent and actually putting like your boots on the ground is the first step in success in the invention process. I think hesitancy is like never justified, especially because it's not like the invention convention process judges you on how cool or how uncool your invention is. I think all inventions are cool. I think everyone should be motivated to actually commit to research and commit to their problem solving.
When your name was called for the Community and Societal Benefit Award, what was your reaction?
Yeah, so in the Invention Convention Nationals, I knew I like had a pretty bad presentation. I knew my project was like really developed. I thought it was one of the best out there in my personal opinion. I mean, I guess everyone has personal bias towards there, but I thought it was like the best product I brought to nationals like ever, and I thought that was super cool. But I knew my presentation itself went like pretty bad, so I was kind of scared. And I told my mom like before they actually announced the name, they announced the award, like the community award. I was like, mom, I'm like getting this award because I just knew that my project like specifically and perfectly fitted it because I brought the word like community like 8 times in my presentation. But I thought everything else went pretty bad for my presentation itself, so I was pretty scared, and I was also pretty relieved when I heard my name.
How did you enjoy the overall experience of the Henry Ford Invention Convention?
Yeah, I think the Henry Ford Invention Convention Nationals is like an amazing experience for individuals and like students, like especially the young children. I think for me, I probably had more fun the first time I was at nationals because it's such a cool experience, and also the fact that like the Henry Ford Museum itself is built on like the foundation of innovation. So I think it's like a great place for the Invention Convention Nationals to be held. I think you also get to meet people who are very alike you, like a bunch of other young inventors who all have the same mindset, want to solve like the largest problems in the world. I think that's super cool. I think the part that I enjoy the most is one just the environment of the Henry Ford Museum itself. I think it fosters competitiveness. I think it fosters and gives me the ability to perform really well. But I also think that like networking with other individuals and kids across the country who have some of the same goals as you and who want to tackle on like the world's largest problems is also super cool and entertaining.
Is there anyone that you would like to thank specifically for help or guidance with your project?
Yeah, so I think the first people I like to thank are obviously my parents. I think they supported me like the whole way through, and if it wasn't for them pushing me to engage in invention convention because they know I like it and I like STEM, if it wasn't for them pushing me to compete in stuff like invention convention, I probably wouldn't do well. And they've kind of like backed off of me like in the last couple of years. But when I was young, it was like you should do this, or my mom would like strictly recommend me doing competitions like invention convention because I really liked STEM and that was like an outlet for me to show my love for STEM. But I think also like the number one person I like to thank is my mentor. His name is Prasanjit Sahu. He's in his fourth year of college at The Ohio State University. Every time I need something with my project, especially for Invention Convention, I call him. At least for my first project I brought to nationals, I think I probably called him for like 300 hours over the course of that project, like in total, just for like help with the research and whatnot. So I think he's the number one like reason why I even had success in Invention Convention Nationals, whether that's the first time I went there or last year. And even like when I was preparing for my speech, I woke up and I'm like, Prasanjit, I did not prepare my speech. I had of hand. I was super busy with other stuff. I'm waking up at 3 tomorrow morning. I need you to maybe help me memorize my speech, and if you have anything on that. And he was like, yeah, sure. So he's super dedicated to me, and we have a great relationship, and he's the reason why I love STEM as it is.
On behalf of all of us at Invention Convention Worldwide, thank you, Tarun, for joining me. Be sure to check out other student inventor interviews on our YouTube channel. Until next time.
Thank you guys. See you.